Dear ladies and gentlemen, I am very much honored and delighted to be with you here tonight. Of course, I do not know what was said about me right now, and I hope it was all right, and probably I will have to stand and fit to the high description, but I'll try to do my best. Since I'm coming from the country which we all, including myself, knew until recently as the Soviet Union or the USSR, and which very much recently turned into USSR, as the country which in fact does not exist, but the country it's where I come from and where I lived and I worked, we would, I think you will not be critical of me if I will spend a bit more time in this lecture talking about what's happening in my country. But first, I would like to start dealing with some global problems and then look at what's happening in Russia in light of what is really the global trend and how Russia fits into it in terms of modern development. All of a sudden, our world has become much smaller. We all feel it. And I can feel it being here, and you can feel that. Here comes to Mexico this Russian who is teaching at Harvard. It's a bit of a thing which not many people expected to see before. But it's true, our world is changing very rapidly. And together with the pleasure of the change that we all see, and with the respect to the change that we have as something inevitable in our thinking, which is very natural for human beings, we're always thinking about the direction of the change, at what this change will bring us. Until recently, the core of the world organization were the two systems confronting each other. It was the so-called Western Bloc of countries with its allies and followers, and the Eastern Bloc, or the so-called Soviet Bloc. It's no longer there. Instead of a bipolar world, we're seeing a world where actually it is hard to find a specific center of power. Maybe it will be even more correct to say that we're seeing global internationalization of our life. And it is going on the basis of consolidation of all the countries. Consolidation, first of all, on the basis for respect for general human values. And I think it's a remarkable trend. It's a very good thing, and I don't think that this is something that had to be neglected or put aside when we talk about the change. We saw first examples of it. We saw first benefits of cooperation when actually the former Soviet Union joined its forces with the anti-Iraqi coalition. For the first time, we saw a major international action taking place when both former chief adversaries, the United States and the former Soviet Union, were acting together. This gave us a lot of hope. This gave a lot of people a lot of hope. And it also gave the American administration a real good possibility to talk about the new world order. And it is quite possible to talk about it. But what kind of order? It's a different thing. Before, if we look at the world, it seemed, on one hand, so dangerous, with the two systems confronting each other, with the stockpiles of nuclear weapons directed against each other and targeted at cities, both in my country and in the United States and in Western Europe, first of all. And now we're seeing a different setup, a different scene. Is it because we're really feeling that this world is becoming safer? Or do we have some reasons to think differently? There is also a certain amount of pessimism on behalf of a lot of people who are saying now that we're talking not about the new world order, but that we're talking about the new world disorder. And there's also reason to say so. One of the main explanations for this, and the main reason, is that before, when the world was bipolar, both main adversaries, the United States and the former Soviet Union, were involving into their orbit or sphere of influence more and more countries. In a way, they were paying these countries for being part of the world. They were sharing their wealth. They were directing their investments. They were funding different kind of research just to make sure that these countries stay with them. And while, again, as I say, we couldn't say that this was a global stability, this seemed to be some kind of a stable and very steady developing world with its own setup. Because with all the talk about the possibilities of a nuclear war, in the depth of the mind, politicians both in my country and in the United States felt that it will be madness to start a war, that it will be something crazy to press the red button, and I think it was something very, very clear. I think it was something that was really affecting the mentality of the whole generation. People felt that they were separated by the two systems, but at the same time, there was a lot of feelings that this war will not start, that we're just under the nuclear umbrella, we're just under the control of this or that major superpower. And here we come to the understanding and to the vision of what this superpower is. If we look back at how it was described actually, and how it was viewed in the world media and by academics, we know the story of the three worlds. Actually, it's not an American or Russian invention, it's a Chinese scheme. This phrase, this classification belongs to Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping. And the Chinese started to use this as early as the end of the 60s, beginning of the 70s. They used the term the first world, the so-called two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. They used the term the second world, which means advanced and more or less well-to-do countries, what used to be described by Russians and by Soviets as capitalist countries in the world. And they also used the term the third world to cover all the developing countries, to describe, including China, to describe the situation there. And the amount of power and what was used to describe this was classified by the people, first of all, as something where the weapons were of highest value. When other things started to mean more, it became very clear that this former Soviet Union was not a superpower. I think this is the historical merit of Mr. Gorbachev, who came to power in '85 and who realized, and who said it loudly and sent the message not only to his people and to the people all over the world, that the greatness of the power, the so-called superpower, can be measured not by the amount of weapons this or that country has. The greatness of the power can be measured only by the living standards of the population. Then this country is really becoming great, if it works for this purpose. Unfortunately, my country, under the old system, was working too much for the weapons and was doing too less, if nothing, for the people. What was even more dangerous